Far more important, of course, are the candidates joining me here in studio. We have with us Antonio Villaraigosa, we have John Cox, we have John Chung, and Travis Allen just arrived. Come on in, sir. We have a microphone waiting for you. When I ask a question, each candidate will have up to 60 seconds to respond. If I have a follow-up question, those answers will be kept to 30 seconds. And when their time is up, we'll hear a ding. And gentlemen, you stop talking at that point. It's pretty simple. So let's get going right now. I wanted to start and spend a good chunk of time on immigration. We'll start with Mr. Villaraigosa. Sir, you're a supporter of the state's sanctuary policy. We've seen ICE raids increase at businesses. We've seen parents get pulled over as they drop their kids off at school and arrested. Now, ICE will say this is what happens when you pull them out of local jails, that they will go out into the public. So my question for you is this policy truly protecting immigrants? Or, Assemblyman, it's not like they are evading all punishment in this state. If you commit a crime, regardless of your immigration status, you're going to be punished. I know that you're not a fan of these policies either, these sanctuary policies, but when people demand deportations, what they're really saying is that they want to break up families, right? Even if you're not saying that, that's what happens so often. A lot of times these families have been in this state for decades. Does that give you pause?
Of course it does, but
Mr. Villaraigosa, Governor Jerry Brown, he recently agreed to send California National Guard troops to the border to help the Border Patrol. Had you been the governor, would you have gone along with the White House, and would you have said, yes, I will do that?
No, I wouldn't have. Washington, D.C.
Thank you, sir. Tell you what, let's move on to health care right now. There is a single-payer bill sitting on a shelf in a committee in Sacramento right now. As governor, and I'll start with the conservatives here, as governor, because there's a good chance that bills like these will continue to come up.
Absolutely.
Would you pledge to veto any move to a single payer or a universal health care system? Assemblyman, I'll start with you on this.
Thank you for starting with the true conservative in the race. Every single Californian at lower prices.
Well, Mr. Cox, I got to go to you next, obviously. But here's the thing. I want you to respond to the Assemblyman, but also when it comes to health care, you oppose the attempts at the universal care, the single payer stuff.
Right.
But when you look at the metrics, we spend a lot of money in this state and in this country on health care per person.
We do.
And by many metrics, we're not getting what we need to get out of it compared to some other countries. So why not try something different?
Absolutely. This would involve doubling the revenues of this state, probably almost tripling the revenues of the state, and put the government in charge. I don't think anybody wants that.
Thank you, sir. Tricia, let's go to you here, because what you just said about the cost of it, that's true. The analysis of that single-payer bill showed that it was going to cost at least as much as we spend right now for the entire budget in the state of California. So for somebody who's, writing the checks and keeping an eye on the dollars and cents in California, how would a single-payer bill like that make sense for us?
Well, first of all, healthcare is a right. It's not a privilege. And so I have the expertise to make a single-payer system work in California.
Well, then let me give you another 30 seconds, because we talked about the cost. Because if it's a thing of priorities, how much more do you have to raise taxes? What are we going to cut? How does it work?
Well, we have to.
Recent Assembly Select Committee that was chaired by Democrats, by the way, they really pumped the brakes on the single-payer bill. And they said that while they do want to see universal health care and single-payer perhaps in the future for California, they don't think California is ready for that right now. Do you agree with that assessment?
I believe, well, first of all,
we won't have to worry about government providing it for everybody.
So are you talking about Medi-Cal, getting rid of Medi-Cal?
I'm talking about phasing it down and making...
And let's talk about the gas tax here really quick. Mr. Cox, I know that you and Assemblyman Allen, you've both been pushing a repeal from this. You're not fans of this at all. How can voters differentiate between the two of you on this issue? Is there a way?
Well, the gas tax.
Assemblyman, thanks very much. Mr. Villaraigosa, something interesting was brought up there. There was the process by which the gas tax was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. It's true, it never went for a public vote. As governor, would you pledge to not raise taxes on anything without putting it in front of the public for a vote?
well, what I will say is that's the appropriate.
All right, gentlemen, I wanted to start off this segment with more of a fun question. 30 seconds here. I know that when you decided to run for governor or you were strongly considering it, you had that talk with your family, right? And so I want to know, what was the best or at least the most memorable piece of advice that you got from a family member? Mr. Villaraigosa, I'll start with you on this. 30 seconds. Some public safety right now. Treasurer, let's start with you. You know, law enforcement groups, they've been very critical of Propositions 47 and 57, propositions that reduce the prison population by turning some felonies into misdemeanors and also reducing some sentences for some crimes. It's clear where our Republicans stand on these issues, but what about you? Treasurer, do you think that voters made a mistake on this, or do you think that maybe more reform is needed?
We got to be smart on crime going forward.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Villaraigosa, this is interesting for you because you've been endorsed by some law enforcement groups. For example, it was the California Police Chiefs Association. They think Prop 47 was a mistake. Do you?
And PORAC, the largest police organization facing the state.
They also think Prop 47 was a mistake.
And crime record as
30-second follow-up on that to you,
Sure.
sir. You mentioned the data-driven. We've seen police chiefs, sheriffs using data very quickly to say that they think that it is causing problems in the state. Do you think the data is there to support that?
I think a lot of it's anecdotal.
And it is true that we spend more on incarceration in this state than we do on higher education, for example. And a lot of people will say that it's not keeping us safe. It's actually just propping up the prison industry, and that's what this is about.
We actually don't spend more on incarceration than we do public education. We spend over $74 billion on public education in California.
On higher education?
Yes.
I believe in punishment, so I believe life imprisonment without getting out is absolutely called for.
What about the death penalty, Mr. Cox?
I'm pro-life. I have a consistent position. I'm a pro-life Catholic, and I have a consistent position on this. But
Mr. Villaraigosa, let's talk about the business climate a little bit. Is California a bad place to start a business right now, in your opinion? And what would you change as governor to help out the small businesses, but also the big ones?
Well, it's a difficult place to do business.
Assemblyman, I know that you feel the same on regulations. What about something else like, for example, the $15 minimum wage that California is now moving towards? Would that be in jeopardy with you as governor?
Absolutely. The $8 billion with them.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Villaraigosa, go and respond to the minimum wage talk, and also about that minimum wage. The fact that it's $15 across the board, no matter where we are in the state. The cost of living, as you know, in the Central Valley, very different than the Bay Area or Los Angeles. Does it make sense to have that same minimum wage everywhere in California?
Well, there's some states that do have a differential for rural areas. And
specifically, you've written that he mismanaged schools, housing, and he mismanaged the overall economy. I want to let you, Mr. Villaraigosa, respond to that. But Treasurer, go ahead and explain your position on this.
Well, let me address some, because fiscal values are social values.
Let me follow up then, 30 seconds. But be specific, though. Where did he mess up as mayor, you think? Give me a couple examples.
A lack of investment in housing.
Lack of investment. Go ahead and respond to that, sir. 60 seconds.
I did $100 million. Well, I'll get a little more.
Yeah. I'll give you 60. We'll see where we're at.
I did $100 million in a housing trust fund.
Kevin, I'd like to get in on some of the things that Antonio said about education, housing, and pensions, because these are important issues.
One second. We'll come back around right now, but I do want to touch on water because we're running out of time in this segment. So let me ask you here, Mr. Treasurer. You can talk about the tunnels, but also there's a larger question that I have for you and Mr. Villaraigosa, and it's, do you think environmentalists have too much power when it comes to water policy in California?
I do not. I think they provide constructive input.
Another fun question, 30 seconds. I know we've been talking about some of the challenges and the problems here in California, but I know you guys love living here, and I want to know, what do you love most about living in California? We'll go this way this time. Treasurer, what about you? Gentlemen, thanks very much. Assemblyman Allen, you've been quick to point out that Mr. Cox did not vote for Donald Trump in the last presidential election. And I know you've used it. In fact, you've already done so already. You've used it to question his conservative credentials here. Mr. Cox, you can definitely respond to this in a moment, but I just wanted to give you a chance, Assemblyman, to kind of flush out exactly what your concern. Why is it such a big deal that he did not vote for the president?
This is extremely important.
The job done.
Well, let's talk about the problem of high-speed rail in many people's minds, because that is a problem that a lot of people here in the Central Valley are very passionate about. How far are you willing to go in support of high-speed rail? We've talked about this before. Do you see it going from L.A. to San Francisco as it was originally drawn up with you as governor, Mr. Treasurer?
I see high-speed.
Thank you, sir. Assemblyman, you're not a fan of high-speed rail. That's no secret. However, work has already started here in the Valley. There's a lot of stuff already underway. How exactly would you pull the plug on this project?
Very simply. On day one, if you want to go anywhere in the state, you can take Southwest Airlines for $59 each way with a 2-week advance purchase. What the Central Valley needs, return the money back to you, the California taxpayers.
I do want to point out that Southwest Airlines does not fly out of Fresno, sadly. We would love
That's actually something we need to change.
Going to waste it as the governor.
We got just time for one more question here. I wanted to talk about affordability of housing here in this state, because living here in the Central Valley, I don't know how you guys in Southern California and in the Bay Area do it. Honestly, I don't understand, because the difference in the cost and the availability of whether it's rent or if you're looking to buy, it's astronomical. So what can we do right now, and what would you do as governor to really make it easier for families to get into homes that they can afford? Mr. Treasurer, I'll start with you.